DeepSeek coming out stealth mode and completely throwing the market upside down in terms of our assumptions about the amount of compute power we thought we needed to run an LLM. So I am the kind of lawyer that you visit when you've got a GDPR or an NI question. We then had OpenAI changing its mind about how it felt about copyright infringements. We could spend an entire hour running through it. It's one of the most enormously comprehensive pieces of legislation that you've ever had the misfortune of reading. So careers will be born doing nothing but the EU AI Act. It's highly specific. The way that works is that there are servers somewhere on the planet, and when you send data to OpenAI, that data is processed there. And because it's a public model, it will then learn from that data. And it will take the input of your data and effectively retain it as part of its memory.
I'm going to let you tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Raoul Lumb. I'm one of the partners at SMB. I specialize in technology and data law, which is usually people's cue to sort of excuse themselves and get a drink at parties, but you're stuck with me. So what I do, really, I advise technology developers, so people who make software and look to sort of license it out. And I also advise business, typically media, entertainment, publishing, on procuring software or getting software developed for their users. So I am the kind of lawyer that you visit when you've got a GDPR or an NI question.
Well, at this particular moment in time, and just to give some context for the audience, this week has been very poignant in the world of AI. We've had DeepSeek taking the world by storm.
Yeah, it's a busy week. We'll say that much. So we're recording this on Thursday. I think Monday was DeepSeek coming out stealth mode and completely throwing the market upside down in terms of our assumptions about the amount of compute power we thought we needed to run an LLM. Like you say, we then had OpenAI changing its mind about how it felt about copyright infringements and use of other people's works to create something new. And on Monday, we're getting the first tranche of the EU AI Act coming into force. So China, America, and Europe, within 7 days, are all going to have their say.
Just to elaborate and provide some context, I think the reason we've got experts such as yourself in is to really understand, how does this affect our businesses? There's a lot of blinded by science when it comes to AI.
Yes.
But under the hood, there's data privacy concerns. There's looking at, well, who owns what data and what can be done with it. We're in a very peculiar time that I don't want to say laws have been broken. Hopefully you can.
I assure you they have. Yeah, okay. It's interesting. So I mean, it's been the hottest topic. This happens in technology. So a new wave of technology comes along, and it's all anybody wants to talk about. So back in sort of 2022, no, earlier than that, people, all they wanted to do was talk about blockchain. Everything was a blockchain business, and people said, "What's the law of blockchain?" And it's the same with AI now. It's all the clients want to ask you about. Can I or can't I do the following things with AI? And we haven't, up until this point in time, had any rules which are AI specific, if you're with me. So the game has been trying to figure out how a new technology interacts with the law that already exists, and in most cases didn't contemplate that AI might exist at all. And that is all copyright and data protection coming out their own boxes to try and interact with something entirely new. And it's interesting, we were talking before we came in about privacy in the context of AI. The big hurdle that people have been getting over has been protecting data against leakage, basically. A, data that was online being put into models with no permission, and B, data that organizations have, which we think will be very interesting to analyze with AI, going into clouds and maybe never coming back again once they're finished.
I think it's important for the audience to understand what a private cloud is, what a public cloud is, and especially the context. We spent years doing research and building at GAEA AI specifically for enterprise, large organizations where technology and data is a fundamental, like an oil tanker. It's the structure that you can't just rip it out, and you do need to protect the integrity of the hull because you wouldn't want oil spills, because there are serious ramifications. Corporate, which is more like a small company, you can change direction quite easily. You can be any different form or function. And then like the sole trader, the individual. Now, a public cloud, if we look at the context of the major AI companies such as Google and Microsoft OpenAI, everything goes in when you prompt. Yes, if you're going into one big ocean, that's a public cloud or private cloud, in simple terms, being ring-fenced private domains, where there may be a huge amount going on within these kingdoms, but those are safe and protected with their own rules.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so it's people often don't really think about how computers work and give them the answers to the questions they put in. So back when we were young, a long time ago, everything was run locally. You had a computer in your home, in your business, you put a CD into it to load up a program. All the data on that computer remained on the computer. You could go anywhere. The big revolution in software that happened, I mean, well over a decade ago now, was SaaS. So software as a service was the idea. And that was a real movement away from computers figuring things out locally to changing the way it worked. Instead of figuring out answers locally, your computer would send your question over the internet to an enormous computer somewhere else. You didn't necessarily know where it was, and the computing will be done there at their end. AI is particularly interesting for that, because the thing about AI and machine learning is that machine learning isn't taking your question, processing it, and giving you an answer back. It's also adapting to the information it has learned from your question. So for AI procurement, one of the big issues that just every client has had when they look at a whiz-bang new solution that has an AI component is trying to figure out where the processing of their data will take place. So when you say, I'm an enterprise, I've got colossally valuable data in the oil tanker, where is that oil going when you want to analyze? And is it all coming back? Because the way that Place and OpenAI is, I'm not picking on them, it's a good example. The way that works is that there are servers somewhere on the planet, and when you send data to OpenAI, that data is processed there, and because it's a public model, it will then learn from that data, and it will take the input of your data and effectively retain it as part of its memory. And that's a data leakage risk if you're an enterprise organization, because once you fed something confidential into a publicly available model, how can you be sure that it won't respond to another user with an input that you've taught it?
In effect, it's like a little Chinese whisper word. I can mention one thing to you, and then you can go back to your office and say, well, this is what Graham said. And then somebody you've told it to will learn whisper somewhere else. And before you know it, somebody in Manhattan is having a conversation, third party, which is not really kind of what we said, but third hand, evolved. I suppose this is where it's hallucinating. It's taken some data which we could have the premise. We're doing a podcast, so we want everyone to hopefully tune in and watch. But if we're having private conversations, we don't want that to happen. But if you're interacting with some of the big models, effectively, you're not alone, are you?
No, that's right, because you're not running that model locally on your servers, knowing full well that even if the model does learn from the data that you feed it, it will only ever respond to you with that data. There's no other users. The minute that you're using in kind of public AI, i.e. where you're using a product that is back-ended by something like ChatGPT, which so many AI products on the market are, you are having that conversation in public. And Manhattan's probably a good example. So Grand Central Station in New York, they say there is a spot where if you whisper in one corner, the guy in the other corner can hear you all the way across the station because of the acoustics of it. That's a good example for the way that users of an AI can accidentally come to realize that they're seeing data that is coming from another user's prompt.
And I actually saw a video of an influencer YouTuber where her voice and identity had been taken and turned into a model where she wasn't, I'm not sure where, but she ended up having a chat with herself. And it sounded like she was talking to herself until she got into some detail. It went really dark really quickly.
Yes.
It became very, very weird. Now, taking someone's identity, there are ramifications in entertainment, taking corporate data, very dodgy. Personal, even from a personal human being perspective. This has been predicated, I think the AI revolution as we know it had a great foundation in social media, which is we became the product. And this idea of, I'm sharing with my friends and my family. Look at suddenly we've been trained to be put into a behavioral pattern where we've given ourselves away. This is the point where we find out what's being done with it.
Yeah, you're right. We have, as consumers, been conditioned to think that everything is free and should be free. And the price of that is data. And you will know, to talk to a GDPR lawyer here, that I have huge concerns. The AI Act coming into force on Monday, one of the things that will happen in Europe is effectively a blanket ban on the scraping of personal data from the internet for use in things like facial recognition. But in a way, we will know the cat's out the bag. That's already been done because we're all so used to submitting our data entirely freely in return for products that feel wonderful. And then retain the data and learn it.
When things are generalized and sold in a way, AI, we discussed this prior to coming on, it's arguable that AI is not even a real thing. It is infrastructure and in its component parts, it's data, it's a model, it's machine learning. It's all of these things combined into a generalized term. And something that was discussed with Professor Song is it's an amalgamation of different forms and functions, but we've been educated primarily in summarized headline form. It's very dangerous when you generalize everything. When we look at generalization in society, there's many labels for it, very few are very good, but that's how the world is currently learning about it. So when this new act comes into force, well, surely that's about detail, describing elements, but we just don't AI.
Yep. So we look at the AI Act. We could spend an entire hour running through it. It's one of the most enormously comprehensive pieces of legislation that you've ever had the misfortune of reading. So careers will be born doing nothing but the EU AI Act. It's highly specific. But I want to come back to what you're saying about what is AI to start with. In a sense, it is even intelligence, which I think one of the real sort of risks for users of AI, especially LLMs, which we use the term synonymously at the moment, is that what they're receiving isn't really intelligence. It looks like intelligence. It's designed to give the appearance of a human reasoned response, but that's not what the AI is doing. And if you ask it to interrogate its decision making, it can't demonstrate intelligence to you.
It's an actor in a way, from a human perspective. And it's come across as the human experience is a very important part of all this. And if we're to really get into the nitty-gritty of how different types of AI work, the large language models, in terms of vision AI, transformers, neural networks, then there is rationale and logic to understand how they function. But to describe that as a generalized thing, if you do generalize it, you can create fear. You can say, well, you'll all lose your jobs, or you're going to be able to trust it, or it'll do this, it'll make efficiencies. I mean, we've discussed being sold convenience. Anything which is sold on convenience is always at a cost. And it does seem a lot of the narrative now is look over here, don't look over there, look over here. Well, actually, what is over here? What are the risks? And are people being responsible in communicating the things which you have a great understanding of?
Okay, we can talk about the risk. I mean, one of the, I think it's not a legal risk, it's a social risk, is accepting reduced quality all across the board, because convenience, fast food, nowhere near as good for you. It doesn't even taste as good as something cooked with organic ingredients by a wonderful chef with great care, great skill. AI is a lot like fast food for data output. I mean, then I said it in the context of LLMs. So my experience of using AI, A, seeing it at clients, but B, using it as a business tool at SMB, is that whenever we have used AI to try to generate an output that we would usually get a human to do, quality falls off. You're at the lowest end of human delivery with it, and it can't get better because it's fundamentally a guessing machine without intelligence behind it. So it uses, and we use that word, context. It doesn't understand why it is generating a particular response, only that it's generating a response that looks like other ones in the past. And 99% of the time, that response is close enough. But a world of ubiquitous AI content is effectively a world of just good enough as an output forever.
It's the it'll do.
Right. Yeah, exactly that. It's just good enough from someone who is winging it. It's my assessment of its quality.
So one key factor that, to get context, law firm will have expertise. We've heard about Harvey AI, and you've mentioned there are multiple others, and we see this again across multiple sectors. There must be a point in time that we will reach where those people who have accepted the outcomes, the people that would check the outcomes, senior partners, in this instance, retire. What happens then?
No, how do people learn skills? I mean, it's interesting talking about the speed of delivery. One of the things I was told to a young lawyer was whenever clients ask you to do something, do it quickly, because clients are not legal experts. They don't know what good lawyering looks like, but they know what quick lawyering looks like. And I think consumers with AI products for every industry, and law's not immune from it, will get used to preferring a quick output, which is AI enabled, with a loss of quality. So an educator, great example. I'm sure that LLM-powered AI will be able to put together courses and presentations that look about right for rooms full of students, learners, call them what you will. Will they be as good as human-designed courses who are actually thinking about the specific students and the outcomes they're looking for? I bet they won't.
We have a very strong belief about accountability, trust and truth, and context, and never to sacrifice that. That is not an acceptable sacrifice to make.
If what you saying was interesting, which you were essentially saying, well, look, this is a different form of model in which we're not doing computer-powered guesswork. We're actually doing computer-powered reasoning, which is accountable and readable back.
I think it is fascinating, though, to see that should be an indicator to where people can sit. In Professor Strong says, we need to look at AI as a companion that behaves in many ways like a human, but is fundamentally and will never be a human. I think people have their place, but it's not part of the conversation to the level it should be.
The thing is, the people driving that conversation just aren't interested in it as a topic, because it doesn't push share prices off. I mean, like I'm not a total AI cynic. AI can do some wonderful things. It can drive efficiencies in organizations. It can, you were talking about use cases earlier, it can look at data that no human would have thought to analyze or find patterns in. It will drive huge value in particular use cases. The idea of a AI ubiquity in which we are all removed from employment by all-powerful machines that are experts in everything, I don't see it, because it's the same tech hype that you hear on roughly a 5-year cycle, in which people looking for investment tell you that this is the magic beam that will change the world, and we're in that phase of the hype cycle.
Explore that a bit further, especially given where we started with the week's events. So what we have seen, which is now being displayed by DeepSeek and we know will propagate very quickly is it is not necessary to have the level of compute power to it's almost in many ways that's the lazy way is, well, we can't be bothered to create efficiency, so we'll just we'll just need more money.
Yep.
But the fact is there are certain elements of business that have an interest in making sure share prices and infrastructure go up. It costs a lot of money, so don't you try and do it. So effectively, this is the play that we've seen for hundreds of thousands of years of the construct of power, in a way. And we know what happens when that gets found out or gets pushed too far. There's a redressing of the balance. And that balance is, Professor Song calls it democratizing AI.
Yep.
If it's perceived out of everyone's reach, they won't try. But once it's understood it is achievable, then we will have many, many other ideas. Because at the moment, we're limited to effectively 3 organizations plus a new small one. And that's the view that the majority of all the narrative is around.
Yep. Well, what you're seeing is essentially tech debt as a moat, if you will. So, the first of any product is always the worst technologically. I mean, and I keep hopping back to blockchain. Bitcoin, it's terrible as a piece of software compared to revolutionary, but compared to other blockchain systems, you look at what you can do with Ethereum or Solana as alternative chain technologies, they're much better. And you're seeing the exact same thing with OpenAI. It's just like blockchain. It's much, much slower, much more compute intensive than all the new techs, but they've sunk billions into this because first to market, huge advantage. And as you say, the marketing is now trying to turn that tech debt into some kind of defensible selling point. Say, no, don't use a Chinese product, which appears to be far more efficient than this one, because we're the original trustworthy one. Are you really? But that's the marketing to try and defend on all these billions of pounds worth of investment by this stage.
I think we should look at it more in the sense of as a Stevenson's rocket. So from up north, Newcastle. So
amazing we've managed to get steam trains into this, but yes.
Well, if you think about what did that mean in a world and a time where you had horses, that was it. It meant the range that humanity could potentially grow at was incredible. And it did change life, it changed society, it changed countries, it changed the world because that capability. And some people say the world's going to end and there is the usual sort of stories. There are incredible similarities. Now, if we look historically at what happened from the Stephenson's rocket and then the steam engine and then the Industrial Revolution, what it did, the USA became the most powerful country in the world, effectively, off the back of that time period. The scale, the railroads, everything changed because of that. But then it evolved. Humans are still humans. They were still hungry. They still loved their kids. They still had ideas. They had dreams. They saw things. Science continued to have discoveries. Obviously, the capability for convenience of to do more, wider, bigger, better, but still fueled by the human mind. I think what we're going to see here, new challenges, new risks, but monumental new opportunity of the scale of the Industrial Revolution.
I think that's right. Again, like I said, I don't believe in an AI ubiquity in which humans simply don't do half the jobs that humans do anymore. That's not true. I mean, there will be a few people who are the sort of horse farriers of old whose jobs are replaced by AI and in particular by LLMs. But for, what's the word I'm looking for expertise in human relationships, those jobs aren't going anywhere. And I mean, look, as a lawyer, we're not, as a profession, immune to innovation. I'm not sitting here saying, hey, no, we're going to be doing law exactly the same way that we were when I was a lad, when I retired. It's not. We change with the time to adopt new technology. The problem is that every wave of new technology that comes around, people say, hey, lawyers are the first ones to go. We're not. We're more like cockroaches than you think. Hey, one thing you were saying about what's the word? Theme engines, changing the way that we sort of live and work. I think what's interesting this week, just going back to what we were saying about DeepSeek, is the possibility of local compute with AI. I think that starts opening up a lot of really interesting use cases that were previously suggested as possible, but weren't realistic for reasons of confidentiality and compliance. So I think in a way, this might well be the week in which we've had a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to show the actual potential is incredible and vast. It's just different to the potential we've been sold.
Yeah.
But if you can look at a salesman and say, well, I appreciate you're selling a product, and of course you're going to sell your product. I like the idea, but I would prefer to buy from someone else and a different variation or iteration. And there will be huge amounts of choice and massive amounts of innovation, which is also addressing the legal and ethical problems which we began this podcast with.
Yeah, right. And the legal problems are things that local compute begins to solve. But just in case anyone is listening to this and sort of thinking, what is this esoteric nonsense about local compute? We started at the start by saying, hey, AI is typically, till this point in time, been offered as a remote service where your data goes to servers, who knows where. The minute that you can start running a solution that does the same thing, but locally, all those problems go away. And open up a whole range of really interesting use cases for business.
And I think local on scale.
Yep.
I mean, the thing that binds everything together. So let's say you have an office in Paris and in London and New York and Nairobi, all around the world, where it could respect the international or the localized sovereignty. Anyone can now get a model and you can do very, very clever things with it, but it'll take you a year or so to actually create anything that can get a result. And beyond that, we know to productionize something, productionization is effectively taking an idea and making it scalable technically, legally, commercially. Well, that could be another 2 years. But the speed at which everything moves now, yes, the rate limiting factor, which tells you, one, there's probably a lot of shortcuts being had, but that time will shrink further and further down, and there will be services and the ability to say, I've got an idea, deploy, productionize, respecting all of these components. It's going to be very exciting.
It is, but the other thing, I know this is one of the problems that you're solving, is that once you can start running things locally, and what's the word I'm looking for, sort of things efficiently at an affordable cost for business, is you can start feeding you the data that really matters. So I know this is one of the things you were talking about. You're saying all of the currently publicly available models have been trained on all of the data that people didn't mind broadcasting. The real value in businesses is all the data they have that they don't want anybody else to know, because that's where your proprietary data is, that's where your trade secrets are, that's where your unique insights are.
It's where context led. Yes. I mean, that has been our work for the last, well, at least 3 years, but even on a longer term basis. External data, internal data. Totally bulletproof internal data, but giving it context and also making data available. Because people think, oh, well, we can do all this, we can do that, we can do that. But can you connect the data? No. You've got something here, something there, all in different formats. All you've got is an idea. You even may have all the data, but you can't use it because it's not available. So stage 1, identify, provide context. Stage 2, enable that data to become available. The majority of things which affect every component of our life happens outside of our bubble. It was the thing that influences our buying behavior, our actual behavior, what we wear, where we choose to go, probably who we're with. These are all almost like a fluid, circumstantial series of information that is present and influencing us at all times. But we're like the fish in the goldfish bowl saying, where's the water? Or what are you talking about water for? You're crazy guy. Now, if a company can understand and have, well, they already have that data, but understand the external context, to all this really valuable data that they already have and can suddenly make available, and then use the right forms of AI to accountably and empirically extrapolate value, it is potentially life-changing. And I think this will be the first time that all of these various capabilities are aligning where it becomes possible.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's the ability to read data, catch and for analyze data, catching up with our ability to generate it at long last. Right. We reached a point in sort of human society where we were generating way more data than we could possibly read or analyze. Never mind, I hate to use the trademark word, surface an insight from it. The AI will let us finally catch up and do the reading on the data that we're generating. You're right. I'm fascinated to know what we will begin to learn once we can actually analyze the data that matters with AI.
I mean, insights of value are like needles. And we've just been saying what we really need is make the haystack bigger, higher that we pay. And all they're making it do is harder to find anything and creating more noise. And it's really discerning the difference between noise and value. And having some structure around that makes sense. And that structure is also a reflection of how it works legally. Now, an interesting question that I've had, specifically around the law and data.
Yes.
And a good friend of ours working on a Postmaster, a very public case. I talked to him about it and I said to him, is it correct that that entire situation would not have happened if the data had been correct in the horizon?
Horizon, yes, that's right.
He explained to me actually the reason for it coming around was far more political and there are other dynamics, but ultimately, if the data were correct, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, so one of the things that we learned from the Horizon scandal was that computers aren't with rights. They can give you information with very plausible. Yeah, it really looks like money has gone missing from local post office, and there's no explaining it because look, here all the numbers are, show you money coming in, and then the figure is wrong at the end. Someone must have taken money out. So evidence that was the result of a computer program was presumed to be true. So we had a rule in law that said, look, if one party brings evidence that consists of data generated by a computer, we assume that's right. And it's for the other guy to prove it's wrong. So it's not that the facts started in the middle saying, well, I think there's money missing, well, I don't. I think if you're right, prove your system works. The system was assumed to work. And we had that as a rule of evidence in the UK. And I feel we'd had that since the 80s, which is embarrassing because I have written the piece on computer evidence in exactly this context.
So that's madness. It's presumed to be correct until rigorously proved incorrect. Now let's put that into the context specifically of large language models, because are they not data in effectively technology systems?
Yep.
So even though we know they hallucinate, we know they're trained on subjective data, not empirical, social media, internet. We know most of that data is in fact stolen.
Well,
yet the law does not recognize that all of those factors are correct.
Yes, so these were rules that were really written expecting to be dealing with databases that had some very fixed inputs. So a database will not irrationally forget a number or fail to add two numbers together correctly. We've seen with tragic consequences in Horizon what happened when that presumption is wrong, because
lost their lives.
Right. And these were defendants who had absolutely no ability to question the inner workings of Fujitsu's Horizon products. They had no ability to see in the box. They weren't given access to the box to study. It was utterly incontrovertible as evidence with those rules. I think it's right to say that the government is considering repeal of the presumption. Yeah, I mean, we're working government time here, so things go slowly. But I think people have recognised that the automatic presumption that you trust something because it came from a computer doesn't work in today's world, because it turns out that software can get things wrong.
I mean, it's extremely important, I think, for the general layman.
There is no reason to suppose that everything made to run a computer has been assembled by infallible geniuses who haven't made mistakes. Of course, computers can be wrong because they're running programs that are made by people, and people can be wrong.
They're called bugs.
Exactly.
That's why they have.
They're ubiquitous.
Yeah, that's why you always have new revisions and new releases. I mean, we know it, and also involves refactoring on occasions. You enter into situations where somebody may do something that hasn't been considered. They're called edge cases. So, but it is just that. When I found that out, just found that absolutely mind-blowing, because we're moving into a phase now where these things need to be known, they need to be understood. And that goes back to one of the key points we're talking about, and which is super important to us: accountability, explainability, AI of the future, our approach, every bit of data. We're not claiming the data was necessarily right, but we're saying this is the data, this is where it came from. It may be your own company data. We've dealt with huge amounts of enterprise data. Something's always wrong with it. You've got to go through the cleaning process. But if you can look at it as evidence, and you can look at the rationale, the logic, and the reason, you say, clearly we've identified that this is some sort of mistake. Now we can go back to the root cause and say, because these buttons here are too close to each other and people are concentrating and they accidentally set. You can't get to the root cause if you're constantly covering things up.
There needs to be checkability for someone bringing that evidence. It's also the trend for AI legislation. So I don't know how many people are boring enough to know, but our first rules ever in Europe about the use of AI systems were in the GDPR. It has a single article on AI in which it talked about accountability and said, well, look, if you process data about people using automated profiling systems, those people are entitled either to get a check of it or a redo of it if you can't prove what the decision-making process was. And that was the first ever specific rule we had about AI in Europe. And the AI Act turns that all up to an even greater degree for various people in the AI supply chain and various industries. But that's the way it's going.
See, it puts it two factors. One,
yes,
the chain of thought. Go back to education. It's all about not the outcome, but how you came to that outcome. We've discussed before training. You could get to the best train ever, make a load of money, and say, okay, prove you didn't. That wasn't an inside job. But it wasn't inside trading.
Well, prove it was an educated decision as opposed to just somebody saying, all on black, that's one.
It's proving the rationale. And therefore the outcome, even if the outcome is correct, if you can't justify it, I mean, imagine going to court and the judge says, okay, well, you're making this claim. How do you back it up? Well, it's just said, isn't it? Yeah, here we go. Well, if I can't understand the rationale and reason, this is why I think AI within rationale and reason is going to be super important, because every regulated industry is regulated on the basis that it understands your decision-making process. And this is what I think people are not seeing or talking about.
No, that's right. And increasingly, regulated industries will be under obligation to prove their decision-making process. And if they can't, it'll be done by humans. So there's no point sinking millions into cost efficiencies to do things in an automated way if consumers will simply have the right saying, I don't want to be refused credit. I want a human to go do the process again. You can't say anybody predict that.
Yeah. I mean, in the incorrect conclusion, even if there are incorrect conclusions, if you can get to the root cause and go, okay, I see why this is happening. I see where they came from. It's actually this data source over here. Yes, to walk blindly into anything is potentially foolish. It's foolish.
Yeah. Well, what's the word? By not having that traceability, it's taking away the ability to improve things. It's not great having systems saying, we get 5% errors, but it happens really quick and really cheap. Would it be wonderful if, as a business, we could identify where the error was coming from and fix it? That surely be the saving worth having.
I mean, the old adage, you learn more through your mistakes than your successes. Very, very true. And the entire development process, technology is iterate, learn, and redo and go, refine, make better, understand what went wrong.
Sure, it also comes trust. I mean, and to get back to our sort of trades example, imagine that you have a sort of coin flipping machine that repeatedly guesses which way the coin will land. Is in order to start putting serious money on that machine's guesses, you need to trust it. You need to know that this is not a machine that has just been lucky and guessed right 5 times in a row. It's something which is actually looking at wind speed, movement of a coin, and saying, I know which side down it will go. If your machines aren't trustable, and you can only have that by being able to trace their decision-making logic, then you are fundamentally putting it all on black each time.
We need to see beyond immediate, because on so many of these things, I mean, convenience and we talked about it before, and mentioned it before, Spotify.
Yes,
which I love, brilliant, because effectively it's an opinion machine. It gives you more of what you like, but what it's not saying with an algorithm is all the things that perhaps you would have liked if you were ever exposed to, but you never are, because it's just a few degrees left to right.
Yep. So the power of the algorithm to not just serve you what you like, but to shape what you like is terrifying to me.
It's the shaping, yeah. Because subsequently, the young artists would go, they've learned a huge amount, but that they didn't realize existed. So it's almost polarizing people's view and giving them tunnel vision, but they're not aware they have tunnel vision.
No, people also, it sort of amazes me, the adjacencies to some of my viewing. And I find myself being walked towards content I've got no interest in ideologically, because so YouTube, for example, is you're someone who likes mixed martial arts. You watch replays of fights. Presumably, it says you're a conservative persuasion, because it's got a huge conservative fan base in the USA. It's the sort of, national sport of the Republican Party, MMA. And YouTube thinks, because I watched that on YouTube in sort of video form, that I will also be interested in American Republican political measurement. No, it's of no relevance to me. Here's someone in the UK with a limited amount of ideological crossover. But there's the adjacency as YouTube tries to walk me in to that as content and effectively shape my views.
Yeah. I mean, a good way of doing that is a Newcastle fan. More used to
commiseration.
It's getting better. For years it was not, but anytime Newcastle beat one of the big teams, it's always fun to watch a fan channel from one of the opposition teams, especially when Newcastle deserves to win and played really well, especially when Alexander Isak scores, which he does a lot now. And just to see how amusing it is from the opposition fans, so saying, why our forwards are useless, they're rubbish, why don't we get Isak? We never get an Isak. But then I just get tons of Arsenal and Spurs YouTubers. But I'm not really interested. I'm a Newcastle fan. That's what I want to say.
Yes, and you immediately assume it takes to try to feed me more. But
it gets confused and thinks, oh, okay, well, now we'll take it another. It's just the odd thing, because I've got an inquisitive mind, I'll search for things which could be non-related to my interest, but it's to do with a client or an idea.
Yep.
And it's just thinking, this makes no sense. So I get the weirdest, most random stuff on YouTube.
Yep. Yeah, I know what you mean. You sort of play a single video to children on YouTube. I think that's what I want to do, is want to pet the pig. But this is interesting in the context of AI and public models, because what you're describing is I watched something unusual, whatever it was on YouTube, and it's desperately trying to feed me more of it when I come back. That's okay. That's a sort of private use case, which is you and YouTube. But public models, that adjacency identifies in your viewing behavior is informing YouTube about other people, what they might think is interesting. And AI is the same, in that the things that you prompt an AI with and the data that you feed into a public model can inform what it will say to other users. So it's not just a sort of private issue for you that the AI may then start talking back to you about things that you said yesterday. It might start talking to other users about things that you said yesterday. And so your late night confidentiality breachy binge will suddenly become an issue for other users and not just you, because it is one model for everyone.
But it's interesting, two factors. If there are people that are very vocal, and usually the most opinionated are more amplified and extreme versions of the average person, but they probably create 100 times the content of a normal person.
Yep.
So the majority of information, whether it's news, which we know that news is of a political league, and it doesn't matter which one, but they are, again, amplified versions. Social media, the people that create the majority of content, which then these public bodies are consuming, are effectively interacting and leading people towards the more crazy.
Yeah, it's a disproportionate amount of extreme.
Absolutely. So it's 100 to 1, then dealing with the individuals and presenting as true. And this is what actually the majority want. It's disproportionately just not correct, is it?
No. Well, it flips this sort of bell curve. It gets off the way, because you're right, people at the extremes generate more of the content because they're extreme. Right? If they have a viewpoint to push that's widely shared, it's not that interesting to share middle of the road content that everybody kind of agrees with and doesn't really offend anyone. So you're right, AIs get that disproportionate amount of extreme content, and you can see it. So Grok, an LLM trained off Twitter data, was raving mad because half the content on Twitter is for nutters by nutters, and lo and behold, trained an LLM on it. It transpired that millions and millions of words to learn off, but all of them quite mad as an output.
I have to say that was entirely predictable, though.
Yes, if you would have seen that coming.
It is quite crazy. Any other final topics?
Good Lord, no. We've what have we done? We've done AI. We've done that through blockchain. We've done steam engines. You call it a wide-ranging interview.
Yeah, I think we should keep all these conversations from a human perspective, inject some expertise in there. We're effectively all people, and we're going to want to be right together.
Yep.
Well, pleasure having me here.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.